everyone, welcome to this class. We're going to paint this beautiful rose. I found this picture online and I really like it. I like the colors and that there's some yellow and then there's some red, and whenever I see something red, then I know like instantly like, okay, I'm going to work with some yellow undertones as well. And I like that there's some orange too, because when you look at the color wheel, to create an orange you need red and yellow. So that's why like we don't have to actually add an additional color orange. We can just work with the red and yellow. Now for the yellows, I chose two yellows. Imidazolone yellow is just the primary color. According to Holbein's color chart, you could go with different yellow. I suggest like a basic yellow, just a regular yellow. Here's my test piece from last night. So before I start recording these classes, I like to have something that I can refer to. Like, so last night, that's how I came up with this color palette, and I didn't add the shadows yet. The edges are quid red with some bright rose, right? And then here, because I have a shadow, I see a shadow in the reference, I decided to add it right away with that first layer because it's a soft shadow. So first thing is to have your colors pre-diluted with water. So what I have here is imidazolone yellow. So there's my imidazolone yellow. So what you want here is more like a heavy cream-like ratio between water and paint. I have like an older paint here, I'm gonna use it. But here's an example, like when you grab, this is bright rose, right? When you grab a little bit of bright rose next to that yellow, but then you kind of, this is how, that's as far as I will go, like with blending colors. And then that will give you a nice shade of an orange. And then I have my quin red, which is actually essential here because I do see lots of this shade. Well, essential for me, it really, because it's up to you what shade of red you're going to use. You do not have to use the same one. I have a little feather from something. A little feather. That was a little tiny feather. And I have a little bit of quin red here already. I'm just going to leave it this way. I'm not going to use green, except for one tiny area, I guess. All right, I'll just dilute a little bit of that. So I have my long quill. This is my long quill size 2. Now this is not that big of a petal, but I will still use it because it's a larger brush. I can hold more water. I'm going to start first with the imidazolone yellow, which is the primary red, yellow, but I'm going to grab a tiny bit of red. So this is the shade, a little more yellow. And I'm trying to grab more like a heavy cream, but again, I do have this quill brush. Of course, it's a choice because I can easily switch to a different brush, right? But I do like having so much on my brush so I can just keep working the areas. This is a little lighter here. This is more yellowish. I'm going to grab more of that yellow right in here. Because this area right here of this petal, I can see it's like most yellowish. And I can pull it, but I want a little more of the red. And now it becomes more like an orange, right? Because I just added a little bit of red to it. So I'm going to grab a little more of that red. And I'm going to travel all the way to here. So whatever, like I grab this shade, right? And I'm trying to picture where I can see this shade of a color in this petal. And that's where I want to apply it, wet on wet. So it's all wet on wet. A little more red with it. So this is what I'm grabbing. So it feels more now like a milk-like ratio when I'm grabbing. I have not cleaned my brush yet, so it's still all the same, right? I grabbed a little more of the quin red here, but I need more of the yellow because I'm gonna go lower, so I'm just grabbing a little bit of yellow now. I'm gonna go right here, and this feels more like a peach, but I feel like it needs even more of that red. So I just grab with the tip of my brush a little more of that red. Now, everything, or not everything, but most of whatever I do here is done with the tip of my brush. So I find that to be the key, because if you just use the full head of a brush, then you just release too much paint and so on. Now this is the edge right here. So I'm very gently adding color here too. This is the place where I actually want to add some more of the quin red, very concentrated paint as a matter of fact. I'm just not ready yet. So right now I'm just going to release whatever I have. So again, this is why I'm using a quill brush, right? So if you have like a smaller quill, that might work. If you don't feel comfortable with quills, you could just use smaller round brushes. I'd suggest to use brushes on a softer side. Now, this needs to be a little more yellowish. So that's when I want to grab a little bit also of the either yellow and then tiny bit of this quin red. So like an orange. So I just created my own shade of orange, but I want a little more red because it felt like too orange maybe. So you can play with that too. And then with the tip of my brush. So I'm just using the tip of my brush. I'm letting the paint to kind of flow. I'm not controlling it fully yet. But with that same brush, I'm kind of going for this quin red. And I'm going to go through this part. Pull the paint up a little bit. It's kind of like trying to recreate what I see in the reference. But my brush lost the shape, so I just need to make it pointy again and grab some of yellow just to add it right in here. Now, sometimes I want this kind of funny shape, and sometimes I'll try to make it back to just pointy. Because sometimes when I don't have enough water, this brush will lose that nice shape. It will look kind of funny, right? So here, I'm gonna leave myself room to actually add colors with a smaller brush and to add the quin red. But right now, I still have the color, a little bit the yellow and so on. So I just released a little more paint. Now the paper, of course, is drying, so it's not like we have so much time. And here, there's some veins. So just with the tip of my brush, I started pulling a little bit of the paint. Now, do I need these little dots? Maybe, but I can get rid of them easily too. For now, I'm gonna come back here, revisit, and grab a little more of just the quin red with the tip of my brush and just add it. Now, when I paint something like this, right? And there's just, we have orange, we see red, we see all that pink. You want to really go slow, and that's why you want to wet your paper a little longer, so you would give yourself more time. I'm grabbing more yellow with the red just to add it here, just so I have a little more color here. And I'll pull the paint. Now you have to be aware of the fact that yes, the paper will dry eventually, right? And it's drying already in front of your eyes. So kind of like you can't just sit on it for too long. So at some point soon, I'm going to start adding a little bit of the blue with red and yellow just to add it right in here, but I'm not ready yet. What I want to do is hold on to this brush, grab my round 8 golden one, okay, and I'm going to grab this drier paint. This is quin red. I do want a little bit of bright rose and tiny bit of either yellow. And I'm going to find that area by a little more concentrated paint, because it seems that the paint is just spreading too much. So these are the edges that should have a little bit of that, which will also give us a nice contrast. A little more of the just quin red. So even though I grabbed earlier either yellow, some of the bright rose, right? Now I just grabbed some of the quin red. So it changes. The ratio between colors changes. And that's okay, you want that. So a long time ago, I haven't gotten that question since, but someone was really concerned about matching every time the colors. I wiped my brush on a towel because I had too much, because I just want to pull this a little bit. So I didn't clean the brush, I just wiped it on a towel. I'm just going to pull a little bit of this quin red, and I'll finish the story in a second. There you go. Just to pull the paint a little bit. Now wipe it again on a towel and pull from the edges a little bit of that color. And another thing is you can manipulate the colors, how they're going to dry. So that's the thing. You just go through these areas again. Now if you want a little more yellow like I do, I just grabbed yellow, but it has to be more like a between heavy cream and cream top like ratio at this stage, because this has been drying for a while. And I haven't really worked this area again, so it might be a little too dry. So unless I don't add much water, then I might just create a bloom. So you have to be very careful. I'm just gonna go through this. Now, another thing is, before I tell my story, another thing to consider is the fact that I also need to add that blue. I'd like to add the blue just like I did in my first piece. Now, of course, when I was doing my test piece, the petals, it's a little different situation. And that's because I was not recording and I wasn't talking. So when you don't record and not talk, you have a little more time, right? So here, these are the yellow, red, and some of the blue. So I want a little more of the red, bright rose, say yellow, yellow. I'm gonna create that shade of blue. There's my blue violet actually. And I can add this beautiful shade of blue violet, but I need more yellow. I do it until it feels right. There you go, something like that. And this is where I can add that soft shadow. Why now? Because the paper is settling, like everything is drying, and I'm gonna add a little more yellow to it because it needs to be more like a yellow gray. And this is where the paint just won't spread as much anymore. I'm gonna add a little color here. There you go. And this is like almost like feels like dry brushing, but it's not dry brushing because the paper is wet. There you go, just a little bit of that. I'm not focusing on the cast shadows yet. These are just like soft shadows, okay? I want to say these are soft shadows, not to confuse you with like the cast shadows that we will actually work on later. I'm trying to see what else I added in my first test piece, the colors, because I just kind of like what happened there in that first version that I did. Here, you see I'm lifting colors now because the paper is drying, so I need to leave this alone and just basically let it dry before I do anything else. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to add a cast shadow right there, and I don't need to do too much to this. And I'm going to grab my rigger brush. So this is my rigger 2 Songbird, and I'm going to grab this dry paint just like before, but I have to find that dry paint. So there you go, this is the Quin Red, and it feels like it's more orange, so I'm gonna grab some of this yellow, which is fine, it's a little more diluted. So I'm gonna move it over where I have this Quin Red, and I'm going to actually grab a little more yellow, and then create some of these veins. So the ratio, right, between water and paint is very important here. It has to be cream top like ratio. It's almost like dry paint. You're almost using like this dry paint over the wet surface of the paper, and the idea is so the paint does not spread. If you have too much water, or any water, I'd say at this stage, you don't want to have new water, then you're just going to create a bloom, right? So it's just going to be a bloom. It's hard to actually grab paint with a rigger brush. As you see, the brush is kind of disturbed a little bit and misshapen. I'm going to grab a little more water here because it's so dry, but that's the only way to have that paint not spread at this stage and to not create blooms. We will create blooms in just a second because we're going to be lifting, and that's technically blooms. So I'm just going to grab a little more over here, but I want a little more water because otherwise everything is just too dry and I can't see enough of that happening. So you just kind of feel it out so you can grab that paint. And then there's some veins. You don't need to recreate all the veins. That's not even important. And I suggest not to, because it can be a bad habit of trying to recreate, everything you see in your paint in the reference image. That's not how I see it, of course, because you could see things differently, but I suggest to not do that. To just capture things overall. One of the best advices I've gotten from my mom was about squinting your eyes. So when you don't want to do too many details, when you don't want to overdo something, you just squint your eyes when you look at the reference. And this way you see things blurred out. And that's kind of how things clicked in my head. Like, okay, I don't need to make it, that detailed. I don't need that hair over there, or I don't need to add this hair. So that's how I kind of learned from that. Now I need a little more paint. And I need more like a cream top. I just grabbed literally like a dry paint, just like in dry brush here. This has become more like dry brushing now, although it's still a little wet. Now, if you want to lift at this stage, all right, so this is green and blue. So I need to add a little bit of red and yellow, basically, to my shadow mix. So all the colors, and I'm going to paint this shadow just like I see it, wet on dry though, between water milk like ratio. And this is the shadow. There you go. And it feels like this should be a shadow too, shadowed, this leaf. So I'm just gonna shadow it with the same colors. So between water and milk like ratio, the ratio. There's a shadow here too. This needs to be a little darker. Perfect. I'm cleaning my brush, wiping on a towel, and softening it where I have the yellowish part of that shadow. So I think I'm done with this rose. Took a while, but I think sometimes it takes a while, but it's well worth it once we see the final results. So thank you so much for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.